For decades, these murder cases faced a tough battle against the unstoppable march of time, held back by a significant obstacle that made them unsolvable until recently. But now, let's dive into 4 cases that have suddenly come alive with fresh possibilities for resolution. These victims spent decades without their names, but they've recently been identified. This not only brings closure to their families, but also sparks hope of finding the culprits responsible for these terrible crimes. Let's get into it. Case number 4, Wendy Stephens. On March 21, 1984, the manager of the Little League baseball field in Buren, Washington, was stunned when his dog returned to him holding a human bone in his mouth. The area, which is now land utilized by the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, received heavy foot traffic and was especially popular in the summer months. After wresting the bone from the dog's mouth, the manager ran to his office and contacted the Kings County Sheriff's Office. Within a matter of hours, the field was teeming with forensic scientists and other experts who were eager to locate the source of the remains. Their answers lay in a swampy area of the baseball field that sat at South 146th Street and 16th Avenue South. After a long day's work, investigators had managed to uncover most of the remains, which were in a skeletal state. At the autopsy, the medical examiner determined the remains belonged to a white female between the ages of 12 and 18 years old, most likely around 15 years old, who stood at 5'2 to 5'8 and was between 110 and 130 pounds. The medical examiner was also able to determine the girl had previously healed a skull fracture and had likely been left-handed. Whilst her remains were skeletal, investigators were still able to determine a cause of death: strangulation. The circumstances and the age of the victim immediately shocked the police and the greater community. There had been whisperings of a serial killer for many years, and this latest discovery only added fuel to the fire. The girl had been deceased for around a year, and the medical examiner and anthropologist believed she had lost her life sometime the summer before. One day after the skeletal remains of the girl were found, the Kings County Sheriff's Office found themselves setting up yet another crime scene. According to the Seattle Times, whilst out with bloodhounds, the investigators came across the remains of another young woman who would eventually be identified as 18-year-old Cheryl Wims. The pattern was becoming too apparent to ignore, and the Kings County Sheriff's Office had yet another homicide to add to their ever-growing list. As reported by the Seattle Times, just 8 months before the bodies of Cheryl and the skeletal remains were found, the remains of 17-year-old Shonda Summers was discovered half a mile from the swampy baseball field. Cheryl Wims was identified within a matter of days, but the victim in the other case was not so lucky. Despite investigators spending months scouring missing persons reports, nothing ever came to light, and she was dubbed Jane Doe B10, or Bones 10. In 2001, the world was shocked as it watched as Gary Ridgway was arrested and eventually convicted in the Green River killings. Between 1982 and 1998, although it's possible he was active until his arrest, Ridgway is believed to have taken the lives of as many as 70 to 100 girls and young women. Ridgway was only convicted of killing 48 victims, but he has readily admitted to being responsible for many more. Ridgway was interviewed at length about the many crimes believed to have been committed by him, and within days, he had given up knowledge about Jane Doe B10. He told investigators that he remembered picking up a young white woman he believed to be in her 20s in Tukwila, a suburb of Kings County, in the spring or summer of 1983. He went on to add that he picked her up near the Pacific Highway South and remembered her murder in detail as he, quote, wanted to make sure she was dead because he had attempted to kill another woman nearby, but she had escaped. Unfortunately, Ridgway was not able to give investigators a name, and the case of Jane Doe B10 was added to his ever-growing rap sheet. In 2020, the DNA Doe Project obtained bone fragments from Jane Doe B10 and sent them to a third-party lab, Astrea Forensics, for further testing. Astrea was able to create a family tree for Jane Doe B10, and after much searching, they came across the possible parents of the Jane Doe. By late 2020, Cecil Gaspar of Denver, Colorado, received a knock at the door that she had never thought would come. Cecil agreed to submit a DNA test, and weeks later, she finally learned the long-awaited truth. In August 1983, Cecil's daughter, 14-year-old Wendy Stephens, disappeared from their Denver, Colorado home. Wendy was a bright and intelligent young woman, but in the summer of 1983, she'd become rebellious and was hanging in the wrong crowds. She would run away from home for a few days at a time, but in August 1983 would be the last. Cecil tried to report her daughter missing, but was brushed off each time. In a bizarre and painful twist, Cecil had submitted her DNA to an ancestry site in 2019 in a bid to find out what had become of her beloved daughter. According to the DNA Doe Project, quote, early in 2019, one of Wendy's parents had taken a direct-to-consumer DNA test and uploaded the results to GEDmatch, hoping to learn the fate of their daughter. Unbeknownst to the parent, GEDmatch had changed the settings on that kit in May 2019 as part of their new policy regarding law enforcement access to matches. Because the parent's kit remained opted out, when DNA Doe Project uploaded Wendy Stephens' data in September 2020, that important connecting lead was not immediately available to the team. There are still 2 unknown Ridgway victims. The last 2 unknown victims are called Jane Doe B-17, who was found in 1986, and Jane Doe B-10, who was found with the help of Ridgway in 2003. Authorities still hope to identify them. Authorities believe that there's still more victims out there, and we may never know the exact number Ridgway killed. Gary Ridgway is currently residing at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. Because of his immunity deal and assisting law enforcement to find all of his victims, there'll be no charges related to Wendy Stephens' case, but Gary Ridgway will never be free, and he will die in prison. Case number 3, Sarah Tatham Abbott. On April 20th, 1979, the New Haven Water Company of New Haven, Connecticut, received an unusual and rather morbid call. On the other end of the line was the West Haven Police Department, requesting their presence near Route 34 on Derby Avenue. They were informed that skeletal remains had been located on the company's property, and a full investigation would be taking place. Managers of the water company raced to the scene and provided investigators with everything they needed to carry out their investigation. When law enforcement arrived, they found partial skeletal remains that were somewhat scattered across the land. The remains were taken into the custody of the state's medical examiner, who was tasked with identifying them. Due to the level of decomposition that had taken place, the medical examiner couldn't determine an exact cause of death, and a post-mortem index is not listed in contemporary reports. The medical examiner could discern that the remains belonged to a white female between the ages of 18 and 30, who stood around 5'1" to 5'3". It was determined that the young woman may have had some sort of congenital condition where the lower part of her vertebra was missing, and she may have suffered from arthritis. And it was also noted that the woman had been born without wisdom teeth. The only items found with the remains were a black lace bra and a Westclox brand folding travel alarm clock in a red case. Without the cause of death, investigators found the investigation difficult. Her identifying features didn't match any local missing persons cases, and no one came forward to claim her remains. 2 years after the initial discovery was made, the woman's mandible or jaw was found in an undisclosed location. Due to the scarce details available, the case quickly went cold, and interest in the case didn't pick up again until 2022 when Michelle Clark, a meteorological death investigator, partnered with Tatham Labs. Tatham did what they do best and were able to obtain a DNA profile from the partial skeletal remains. From there, genealogists scoured records and created a possible family tree, which led them to one outcome. 29-year-old Sarah or Sally Tatham Abbott of New Haven, Connecticut. Not much is known about Sally other than the fact that she was born on August 3, 1940 in Manhattan, New York. At some point in her life, Sarah moved from Manhattan to New Haven, Connecticut, and was last heard from in July of 1970. Sally had been divorced at the time of her disappearance. Her ex-husband hadn't been the one to report her missing. Her siblings had done that. Sally didn't have any children with her ex-husband, and it's unclear if he is a suspect at this time. Her cause of death remains unclear. In 44 years, her family did not once stop searching for her. Anyone with information on Sarah's case is asked to contact the West Haven Police Department Investigative Services Division at 203-937-3905. Case number 2. Joseph Lee Muniz. On October 29, 1993, two squirrel hunters making their way through a wooded area just off I-59 in St. Tammany Parish, Louisiana, close to the Mississippi border, made the discovery that would haunt them forever. As the hunters moved through the area, they came across skeletal remains of an adult male. Whilst the remains had been there for some time, the hunters recognized one thing for sure: a bullet lodged in the back of the skull. The hunters made their way to their vehicles and called the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office. Officers quickly made their way to the scene and began taking stock. They too noticed the unknown victim had been shot in the back of the head, and the remains had clearly been scavenged by animals, making the identification process all the more difficult. According to Tatham Labs, who would consult on this case decades later, only the skull and partial skeleton were covered due to animal activity, along with a few other items of evidence. The St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office was not equipped to take on such a large case, and in November 1993, they made the decision to send the remains to the Louisiana State University FACES Division, or Forensic Anthropology and Computer Enhancement Services, lab in Baton Rouge. The LSU FACES team was able to undertake a much more detailed examination of the remains. They determined that they belonged to a white male around the ages of 25 up to 38, who stood at 5'6" to 5'8". The man had amalgam fillings on at least 11 teeth and a myriad of other health problems. According to the Doe Network and Othram, the young man was possibly healing a broken right hip and showed signs of remodeling to his right femur and fibula, which may have affected his gait and caused hip and back pain. Investigators also found another contributing factor to the man's hypothesized back pain: Schmerl's depression or nodes on several of his vertebrae. Schmerl's nodes are defined as spinal disc herniations, which cause soft tissue of the spinal disc to protrude upward or downward to the adjacent vertebra. This condition often goes unnoticed, however, it has been known to cause lower back pain in some patients. These depressions, paired with the man's existing injuries, would have likely caused the man some level of discomfort. Also with the remains, investigators found a distinctive pair of glasses and remnants of blue Wrangler jeans and size 11 Nike Air running shoes. Despite all of the information that was readily available to them, the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office had a difficult time identifying the remains or who had killed him. For many years, the case fell silent, with the STPSO occasionally performing DNA comparisons from time to time. In 2020, the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office partnered with Othram Labs to perform more in-depth testing. Within a matter of weeks, Othram was able to uncover a list of possible candidates. After further screening, they had potentially tracked down two siblings of the John Doe, who lived in Florissant, Missouri and Burnsville, Minnesota. According to Othram, these two siblings were asked to provide DNA tests and further information about their brother. A year later, in June 2023, Othram and the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office held a press conference in which they identified the St. Tammany John Doe as 21-year-old Joseph Lee Muniz, originally from Burnsville, Minnesota. Joseph's siblings confirmed he had been living in Louisiana in 1993, and they had last heard from him sometime in 1993. At this time, additional details about the suspected killer have not been made public, but the coroner's office did say that they believe the person who killed Joseph has since passed. The investigation into Joseph's murder is currently ongoing, and anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Marco Dema of the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office at 985-643-2467. Case number 1. Catherine Parker Johnson. On August 21, 2001, a construction worker in property developments in Redondo Beach, California, would make a discovery that would shut down operations for the foreseeable future. The discovery was so gruesome and troubling that it would go on to haunt investigators for several decades. And it was only thanks to genetic genealogy and the kindness of strangers that this case was reopened. On the day of the discovery, construction workers were working on a site at 1600 Wallacott Street in Redondo Beach. They were digging in the backyard of a private residence when they made a chilling discovery. Wrapped inside a plastic bag was a headless skeleton. Operations immediately ceased. The Redondo Beach Police Department were summoned to the scene. As the remains were skeletal and without a head, investigators knew they were faced with a near impossible task. The medical examiner charged with investigating the case found it almost impossible to determine a cause of death. The estimated post-mortem index, or PMI, was said to have been anywhere from 1 to 26 years, meaning that the victim could have passed away any time between 1974 and 2001. An anthropologist was brought into the case, and in their initial report, they believed that the remains belonged to a white woman aged 20 to 50. No clothing or personal items were found with the skeleton, so it was hard to discern anything about the woman. Without a face or a skull, investigators were left unable to create an approximation sketch, significantly hindering their investigation. Eventually, the case went cold and wouldn't be picked up until 2019, when the Redondo Beach Police Department partnered with the DNA Doe Project, which mainly relies on donations to fund their research. In 2019, the DNA Doe Project began examining the Redondo Beach Jane Doe's DNA further and made a vital discovery. She was determined to be of sub-Saharan African descent, not Caucasian, as previously noted in 2001. This new information gave the Redondo police a new jumping-off point, and the DNA Doe Project began scouring family trees. Eventually, they came across two women who shared a biological relationship with a possible match. And after contacting the two women, they provided comparative DNA samples, and the DNA Doe Project work continued. In June 2023, the DNA Doe Project and the RBPD announced that they had finally identified the Redondo Beach Jane Doe as 24-year-old Catherine Parker Johnson of Lenox, California. The two women who had been identified as possible matches were revealed to have been Catherine's daughter and Catherine's sister. According to her sister, she last heard from Catherine in May 1981, and the date of official last contact being listed as August 31st, 1981. Catherine had not been reported missing, although it's not known whether this was due to the family failing to report her or the local police department's failure to make a report, as seen in so many missing persons cases. It has been noted that sometime in 1980 or 1981, Catherine left home in Tennessee, headed for Inglewood, California, and ending up in Lenox. Shortly thereafter, all contact ceased. Anyone with information on Catherine's murder is asked to contact Detective John Skipper or Rick Peterson of the Redondo Beach Police Department at 310-379-2477. What are your thoughts on these cases? Which case do you want updates on? And what do you think will be the key in solving these cases? Let me know in that comment section down below. If you see anything you want me to cover next, let me know. But that's it for me. Thank you so much for being here and supporting what I do. I'll see you on the next video. Stay safe out there. Goodbye.